Our scripture today is from Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon, and at about 3 o'clock he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive the usual daily wage and more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Here ends the reading of the scripture.
Good morning and happy Sunday. I love this gospel reading. As a middle child growing up in a large family, I relate to this story very well. Sometimes in my life, I've been the worker who arrived at dawn and worked until the day's end. Sometimes I came late in the day and got the blessing of mercy. But this gospel is so relatable to all of us. When I arrived at dawn and worked hard, I always judged those who played all day and showed up late. I can't believe they were allowed to work so late in the day and then got paid the same wages. I claimed it's God's mercy, and God gets to decide what he does with his money. But when I got there early and judged others who came late, I said, wait a minute, how dare they earn what I earned all day in the scorching heat? Seems that we can always make it work for us. When I was young and working in a local church with teenagers, I had a friend who was appointed to be the chaplain at the new Sylmar Juvenile Hall at the time. She asked me if I would take a day of the week to come up and meet with those teenagers in Juvenile Hall. I began to go 1 day a week, and when you got there, you checked in and you picked up a list of teens that had requested a visit from a chaplain. While I was there one day, I met a young man who was way too young to be there. I was leaving, and a guard asked me to stop and go visit the boy. The guard told me that boy has had a hard day today. His mom left him, and he had a terrible meltdown at school. He couldn't believe she left him, and this time she left him for good. He felt violent. When the guard let me in the boys' cell, I sat on a very bare twin mattress, and I introduced myself. I visited and babbled for about 10 minutes with no response. When I got up to leave, I asked the boy, "Is there anything you need from me before I go?" And the boy looked up and quietly asked, "Can you read me a story?" I was stunned. I scrambled to tell him a story from the gospel about Jesus. And then I visited that boy every week until he was released and he entered the foster care system. We kept in touch, and one day I invited him to a youth retreat that I was directing. He jumped at the chance. He came and was included by all the other teens. And later in the weekend, we were sitting in a large circle with lots of kids, and I asked them to pass a candle. When the candle comes to you, finish this sentence: "My journey to God began with..." When this boy got the candle, he said, "My journey to God began with a story." If you've been reading the news, you know that people warned that Great Britain's exit from the European Union would result in an isolated, lonely island nation. In 2018, the United Kingdom appointed a minister for loneliness, literally, a parliament position for loneliness. Loneliness, they said, is considered a serious health epidemic. It's proven to be worse for our health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. While people tried to politicize it, Britain, in fact, already had a serious problem with loneliness, and research shows us that. More than 9 million people in the country often or always felt lonely in a 2017 report published by the Commission on Loneliness. On Thursday last week, I was outreaching with the police. As you know, we have a serious problem out here in this encampment, your neighbors right here, in this encampment off the Jans Freeway on-ramp. Caltrans is currently working with multiple partners, including the local police and Harbor House. They're trying to clear out this encampment that's been problematic for so long. Our job on Thursday was to document how many homeless there were still, and if any of them or all of them had a relocation plan. Our job was to let them know this encampment is going away and we need to help you with the relocation plan. The police were recording the data, names, ages, plans to relocate. Did they want services? Did they need help? And they asked a young man that all of us in this community who worked at the homeless meal and shelter program, we know him well. And they asked this young man how old he was. And he was silent. So I walked a little closer to him because I know him, and I asked him quietly how old he was. And he whispered, "I don't know." Thankfully, we have his birth date in our files. He's actually going to be 35 this next December, but he has no idea. I asked him if he needed anything, and he responded, "You know, I could really use batteries. It gets really dark out here, and I'm all by myself." In 2021, Harbor House looked at all of our data, and we discovered that approximately 70% of our local homeless have spent time during their childhood in foster care. Across the nation, that percentage varies depending on where you are, between 40% of the homeless having been in foster care and 75%. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, after years in the trenches in South Africa, declared that there must come a time when we stop dragging people out of the river and we decide to go upstream to the mouth of the river and find out why they're falling in. That touched us deeply, and so we opened a house for young men aging out of foster care. We've learned a great deal, sometimes more than we wanted to know. It's been a very difficult system to work in, and there are many pieces of the puzzle and countless reasons why these kids are hurting. We look to house these young men who are transitioning out of foster care, and now we've expanded it to include young men who are experiencing homelessness while trying to finish college. The young man who didn't remember how old he is was orphaned at the age of 3. He's never had a room of his own. He's never had a parent teach him how to read a great book or write a resume. He never finished high school. And the truth is, nobody ever cared whether he did or didn't. He's never learned to drive a car, never got a driver's license. I've been doing this now a long time, and we couldn't do any of it without the help of the churches. And I always look at Dr. Jerry Hong, who does so much of this. And I know a lot of them still contact him, even though we don't meet at the churches for the meals, and who knows when we'll ever return to that. But after doing this for this long and working with all the houses of faith, I believe with all my heart that loneliness is the work of the church. It's the work of God's people. We keep looking to municipalities and governments, but the truth is that only we can address loneliness in our community. It's what God calls us to do. These are our people. They belong to us. And frankly, we need all hands on deck. I'm going to stay around after our service this morning to answer any questions that any of you might have about Harbor House or what we're doing. And again, I want to thank you, Pastor Anna, for having me here today. And thank you again for everything you do for us out in the work that we're doing.